You're listening to Nostalgia Club, the podcast where we look back on our favorite childhood stories and revisit them as adults. At least one of us hasn't read or watched these series, so we also get a first-timer's opinion. Spoiler alert, we will be discussing storylines and future events beyond the first books and episodes, so proceed with caution. Welcome back to Nostalgia Club. This is, if you've listened before, Michael speaking. I've proceeded to bungle the intro to the show for about 15 minutes now. I'm the weakest link of this podcast, but you heard none of that. It was all edited out. It was just chopped and demolished.
You're not the weakest link, Mike. Oh my God.
It's infected the rest of the guests.
Victoria's now the weakest link.
That was Victoria. Wasn't that you,
Yeah,
Victoria?
that was me, Victoria.
And last
Gino.
but not least, Gino. Hello.
What are the vibes of today?
And speaking of the weakest link, here's another British thing we're talking about.
We're talking about the BFG, the Big Friendly Giant, written by Roald Dahl. This is our second Roald Dahl of Season 2.
Wow.
Will it be our last? Yes, it will be our last of Season 2.
You don't know that. No, I'm kidding.
No suspense.
I don't know.
Instant confirmation.
Well, I presume we've got a few more episodes and then it's the end of Season 2?
Yeah.
Oh.
Foreshadowing.
Oh, I wonder what those will be. You'll have to stay tuned to find out. But today you know what it is. It's the BFG. So let's see. Victoria read the BFG.
I did.
As a child, as a small one.
I was as small as Sophie. No, I was probably older than Sophie when I read this, but the point still stands.
Yes. And then Gino's fairly confident that some amount of BFG-ness made it into his brain.
I probably read it at some point, but doesn't count. My brain wasn't ready yet. Wasn't ready for this.
I'm about the same. I remembered the beginning, the rather mysterious and somewhat haunting and mystical beginning of this story, which doesn't have any dialogue for many, many pages. Mm-hmm. It's just all whimsy and mystery and magic. And I forgot everything else after that. So the format stands. Victoria knows what's going on in advance. Gino and I are flying by wire.
I mean, when I say I read it, that doesn't mean I remember all the details either.
Well, sure.
So.
Well, that comes with the territory. So, for those of you who may not be aware, the BFG is more or less about a young girl, Sophie, an orphan living in a dormitory of some kind, who sees a giant figure, literally a giant, stalking the streets in the night, who plucks her out of her bed and whisks her away to the land of giants, wherein she learns not only about giant-isms and the nature of giants, but also about the titular BFG himself, known as the Big Friendly Giant. I'm sure plenty of you listeners have heard of this story if you haven't read it. Maybe you saw the movie, because there was a movie, I think a Steven Spielberg-directed flick.
Did either of you watch it?
Nope. Did you watch it?
No.
Excellent.
But I'm sure the listener did. I'm sure the listener has all the context that they need for the movie, and we don't have to talk about it at all. And it's definitely not because we have no idea what happened. So this is the part of the show where we talk about vibes. Victoria, since you had some prior context, tell us about your vibes returning to the BFG.
Before I started rereading it, whenever I thought about the BFG, I always thought it was a very quirky little tale. I remember the titular character. Didn't remember Sophie, but I knew there was a small child who encounters the BFG. I remembered the snozzcumbers.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you forget them? They're highly unpleasant and highly unpleasantly described in detail.
Ugh.
And rendered in picture form.
Yes.
Quite gigantically. They're giant, warty, kind of hairy-looking vegetable things.
And then the really only one other thing that I remembered from this book is the moment where Sophie takes the sapphire pin that the queen gives her, and she stabs the giant in the ankle. That's all I remember. But what a scene.
Victoria remembers disgusting vegetable and violence.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I have vague inklings of the dream parts of it, but I didn't really remember the
complex
giants or the plot of the story, really. I totally forgot that they visit the queen and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah. But, general, vague, hazy recollection of this book.
When it did get to the dreams stuff, because the BFG has a lot to do with interacting with dreams as physical mediums and entities, did that ring a bell as you were going through it? Oh, that's right, this book has to do with dreams.
Yeah, it was mainly the way that he describes the different dreams that he collects and catches. but I didn't remember specifically what they did with the dreams or anything like that. It was just, I remember this kind of vibe. And yeah.
A dreamy vibe?
Yeah, a dreamy vibe. It also got me excited to talk about dreams today.
Ooh, that's fun. Gino,
Hello.
vibes time.
Vibes time. This book was longer than I remembered, and hey, it was kind of hard for me to read because a big theme of the book is the BFG muddles his words. He flip-flobbles his vocabulary, and they spend a lot of time talking about
Yeah.
it. And hey, those words in my brain, shake them up, jumble them around, it's just like a bunch of loose change. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't work with my eyes. Ouch! Besides that, we'll talk about this later, but the shocking amount of British propaganda.
Yes.
in
I
this book.
I was also going to add on that I think I enjoyed it less as an adult who knows about the world than I did as a child when I was just like, wow, they go and they see the queen and the queen solves the problem. Great.
There's a heavy amount of like child whimsy
Yes.
in this book that relies heavily on the child being whimsy
Yes.
and also never leaving the house.
Yeah.
Because any sort of real world context kind of destroys the enjoyment of the book. For me personally, I think there were still many things to enjoy about it. Sometimes I think, well, that's kind of harsh for a children's book specifically designed to be read by children.
Yeah.
You can't say like, oh, but in the real world, blah, blah, blah would never happen. And that destroyed the plot of the book. And in many cases, yeah, you can't really leverage that against a children's book because you are not the target audience. But there were certainly some aspects about how this book portrayed not
Other
just
countries.
its world, but the world.
Yeah.
that were like, all right. Just like the borders between the mapped world and giant land, it gets a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We could beat around the bush a little bit, but more or less, like Gino was saying, like the way the giant fumbles his vocabulary and also explains, I guess, things about the world and the way the giants interact with it.
Human flavors.
Human flavors.
Yeah.
So in the land of giants, I think it is called the land of Nod.
Yeah.
At one
Yeah.
point. It's this blasted, sort of desolate wasteland, like yellow sands, dark blue rocks with dead trees. Nothing really grows there except for those disgusting snozzcumbers, which nobody eats except the BFG, because the BFG doesn't do what the other giant, like truly huge giants in this land do, and there's only 9 of them aside from the BFG. These other giants eat humans. They romp off from giant land to the human world, and using basically like magical means that allow them to sort of just scamper along the human world and go undetected, they pluck out humans from different places all over the world, and they gobble them up, and that's their supper. The BFG doesn't do this. The BFG has various other talents we'll probably discuss. But when the BFG plucks Sophie away from her bed because she saw him, and the BFG is afraid of human beings being aware of giants and putting him in a zoo, and when he takes her back to Giant Land, about half the book is him talking to Sophie, like from that point, before they really do anything else, and explaining stuff about Giant Land, as well as explaining things about like how the giants determine what people they're gonna eat. And it's the most superficial way to say it is like it's wordplay.
It's like puns about the names of countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically from an English, and that's the British Isles English perspective.
Yeah. You kind of wonder how the translations handle this kind of thing.
Difficult, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, the BFG says a certain giant may go to Sweden because the people in Sweden have a sweet and sour taste, which is like, oh, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
I get it.
Or like the people from Greece taste greasy.
Right.
Ha-ha-ha.
Yeah. Or the people from Turkey, ... You can finish the sentence.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets like a little too, like even that's like, okay, all right, we had our fun. Let's move on quickly, please. But then it starts getting into like, well, certain people from certain parts of the world have like physical differences that require different amounts of them to be eaten. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, okay, I can see we're not moving on. Let's.
There was something about Panama tasting like hats. And I imagine that's a reference to like maybe there's a hat called a Panama hat. I just don't get
I
it.
didn't really understand that one.
Why do people from Panama taste like hats?
Frankly, I don't know.
At the
Part
end,
of-
like the leaders of Panama send them hats as rewards. And
Like
I was
what's going on
Yeah.
there? I have never heard of this before.
A Panama hat, also known as an Ecuadorian hat, is a traditional brimmed straw hat of Ecuadorian origin. You've seen a Panama hat before.
Ah.
So this feels like, someone from, I'd suppose, Britain, old Roald Dahl, being like, Panama. Oh, yeah, that's the place that makes the hats. The people there taste like hats. So
Maybe.
that's kind of what happens with this whole joke, is that it's like this one specific, very Western and particularly like British perspective on making puns about people and countries.
But that's not even a pun. Like, the people from Wellington taste like wellies. Like, okay, yeah, like it's a wordplay on Wellington. But like, the people from Panama taste like hats because they make hats.
Because some hats come from there?
Because the hats are named?
Yeah, so it kind of overstays its welcome.
And it comes up constantly throughout the book. Even after the BFG finishes explaining what giants do and all that sort of thing, even throughout the book, it comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Like when the BFG meets the queen, he goes into it again. And then at the very end, as I mentioned, other countries send Sophie and the BFG gifts. And it comes up again because the Panama people send them hats.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little unfortunate that that's kind of like one of the earliest things you get out of this book, because it can certainly like turn a reader off. There are many other aspects to the BFG as a text and a narrative that are much more compelling, both in terms of how giants interact with the world. For example, the question of how does a giant roam the city streets and not be seen, as well as just the nature of the BFG himself. So once you get past that like rather long period of time where we're talking about human and nationality puns and sometimes just like racist things, then you get more into the stuff that's actually like can survive in a 2023 context. Not that it could survive before, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things is the nature of the BFG's ears and the BFG's sense of hearing.
He's got like a 360-degree swivel on those ears.
Yeah.
They can turn flat so Sophie can sit in them like a big bowl, like a big dish. They move independently of each other to track down dreams.
And he can hear very quiet sounds. The reason why he captured Sophie in the first place was he didn't see her see him, but he heard her heartbeat and realized, oh, I've been discovered because someone's heart rate just increased upon seeing me. And then also when Sophie sits in his ear, she has to whisper very, 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 very quietly. Because if she speaks at a normal speaking level, he feels as if she's shouting.
Yeah, there was
a
a really wonderful part where he says, oh yeah, I hear the conversations of ants and mice. And Sophie's like, oh, what are they saying? The BFG's like, I don't know, man. I don't speak their language. Like, nice.
He's like, I can hear that they're talking. Can't tell you what they're saying.
Made me think of the bees in Redwall.
Yeah.
Bees having their own little situation and conversations. Except the characters in there could like speak to the bees, or at least some of them could.
Yeah.
It was mentioned and then quickly dismissed.
Tacked on at the very end of the book, just like, oh, on a side note, we can talk to the bees.
Yeah.
I wonder if it comes up in future books. Anyways, this is not the Redwall.
The mentioning of the BFG, I think, Gina, you said the BFG using his ears as little radar dishes to sort of locate dreams. In the air. There's an interesting place that the BFG takes Sophie to, sort of beyond where the typical giant realm is, and it's just kind of this misty other place. And the BFG is able to locate errant dreams, like drifting sort of in the wind, that are invisible to the human eye, or even, I suppose, the giant eye, until he catches them in a special net and then bottles them in a mason jar. And some of them are good dreams and some of them are horrible nightmares.
And they just kind of form themselves, but they don't go away once they're formed. They just seek out a human and they, I guess, plop into their brain through their nose specifically.
And the BFG says that he can hear what the dream is about. So it's not just that he captures them and then he also distributes them to children, because that's what he's doing the first night he meets Sophie. He's kind of like the Sandman, not like the Neil Gaiman Sandman, but the folktale Sandman who goes around and throws sand on children so that they have nice dreams and whatnot. You guys are giving me confused looks.
No, I'm just thinking about the Guardians movie where they were like, what if Santa had knives or something?
Oh, yeah.
And then like Jack Frost was there and everyone was like, Jack Frost has ice powers, quick!
Ship him with
Elsa! Sorry.
Rise of the Guardians. That was one of the movies of all time, wasn't it?
Really, you know what? It was more fun than it should have been.
It really was. It really was.
And also Santa had Yeti instead of elves. Or I guess Yeti and elves.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. And also the Easter Bunny had giant eggs.
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh
Australian
Jackman.
Easter Bunny.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin, Russian Santa.
We're totally off track.
Yeah. Well, it all kind of blends together.
Because it feels very folktale-y.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
a giant like captures dreams in a jar and then blows them into like good children's ears. So you better leave out your snozzcumbers. So if you want good dreams for the BFG,
Or you got to leave out, what's the drink that he likes?
fizzle Australian soda.
Because the BFG hates snozzcumbers. He eats them because he doesn't want to eat like humans or anything. And he also doesn't want to steal from people, even though he does and calls it borrowing. But his sense of time is so different from humans that he'll like borrow something for 80 years and be like, oh, I'm going to give it back soon.
And that person is definitely dead.
Yeah.
The fizzy drink is called frobscottle.
Yeah.
Frobscottle.
It's basically described as like a brilliant green like soda pop, except the bubbles go down instead of up.
And it tastes of cream and vanilla.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Makes you fart,
Yeah.
which is also expounded upon at length in the book a couple of times.
What's it called? A whiz popper or
Yes.
something? Yeah. So apparently in giant customs, whiz popping or just farting, tooting, whatever you prefer, is like a sign of happiness and everyone loves it. It's like making wonderful music. And there's a whole sequence later on in the book where he whiz pops in the great ballroom of the royal palace with the queen. And it really hams it up.
It makes me really curious about how Steven Spielberg handled these scenes.
Yeah.
I really want to know.
We should watch it.
Well,
Right
I don't want to
now.
know that much.
What do you mean? Isn't it a fun form of entertainment?
I don't want to watch a giant fart, Victoria. I got other things to do.
Uh,
The BFG distributes these dreams to the children, and he can mix the dreams together.
yeah. That
Oh,
was
right.
cool.
Sorry. What I was saying before all of this was that he can hear what the dreams are about, and then he'll write onto the bottle or the jar what the dream is. So there's a very nice sequence where Sophie says, I want to see what the dreams are about. And he picks her up and he holds her in front of the shelves, and she gets to read all the labels. There's interesting dream lore, I guess, but it's dreams like what were some of the examples?
They're very good dreams in the sense that they don't exactly have a beginning or an end, and they're kind of rambly and don't quite make sense.
They're
Yes.
like the BFG.
Yeah.
They're whimsical and they're nonsensical and
Yeah.
they're just sort of vaguely like, kids like this. This is what a kid would want. Haha, your teacher gets arrested. Haha, that's great. And you did it.
Now you have to wake up.
This was my favorite sequence of the book when I reread it.
Gotcha.
And then I also wanted to highlight my favorite dream that was a little bit meta. It says, I has written a book, and it is so exciting nobody can put it down. As soon as you has read the first line, you is so hooked on it that you cannot stop until the last page. In all the cities, people is walking in the streets, bumping into each other because their faces is buried in my book, and dentists is reading it and trying to fill teeth at the same time, but nobody minds because they is all reading it too into the dentist chair. So it goes on, and it's basically just like, wow, I wrote this amazing book and no one can put it down. And wow, imagine a world like that.
Roald Dahl speaking directly into his book.
Yes.
I had a dream where I wrote such a great book and everybody loves it.
Yeah.
I did also like the one where it's like a little kid dreaming that the president of the United States calls his house and his dad picks up the phone and has to go, it's for you, my son.
Oh, yeah.
And the kid has to go like, yes, Mr. President. No, you'll do it all wrong if you do it that way. You have to do it my way. And then his dad just looks at him like, oh my gosh.
My son. I also like the one of the kid who can turn invisible by pressing his belly button.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he ends up walking around the city invisible, but he realized his clothes don't turn invisible when he does. So then everyone gets scared by ghosts because they think he's a ghost. It's very cute.
there was the interesting distinction of girl dreams and boy dreams.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a little like, when was this book written?
The BFG as a concept was created and published in 1975, but this book specifically was published in the 80s.
Okay. It's one of those things where it's like, well, I mean, the evidence is even here in our podcast. It's like, regardless of the delineation the book makes between girl dreams and boy dreams, it doesn't really matter. They're all just funny and enjoyable dreams.
I'll be honest, a lot of the boy dreams, Didn't sound great to me. Didn't sound like a ton of fun. Sounded like work.
Basically, the justification is if you give a boy a girl's dream, he'll wake up and be like, that was a horrible dream. But that happens all the time. I wake up all the time and I'm like, what was that garbage dream I just had?
Most dreams that people have, I don't think are like, they're not useful to anyone regardless of identifying characteristics.
Yeah.
Most dreams are like, this was complete hogwash. This didn't make any sense at all.
I am curious, and I know we're in danger of drifting too far into last night I had a dream about territory, which I know no one wants to listen to on a podcast.
We're going to get there. It's inevitable.
But I'm curious about how you guys recall dreams. Because when I wake up, there is like a finite amount of time where I recall what the dream I was just dreaming about was before it just vanishes from my brain. And I can't recall it at all.
Yeah.
And in my life, I can probably only remember details about maybe a handful of dreams.
Sure.
But I know I've had many, many dreams that were vivid.
Yeah.
And so, do you guys remember your dreams?
Some, Victoria.
I'm going to go into a long spiel.
Okay, well, I'll just try and sum up my own thoughts, which my track record on summing things up on this show is 100% pure and simple. So when it comes to dreams, yeah, it's the same sensation of I know I've had a lot more dreams than I remember. Generally speaking, and I think there's a study done on this. After you wake up, if you had a dream, you remember it better if you don't move.
Interesting.
The more you move, the more it sort of goes away. And I'm not sure why. I'm sure I could armchair scientist my way into something about like sleep paralysis and not moving having to do with something like that because your body like turns itself off physically when you go to sleep. I know there's been a very small handful of dreams that I've like consistently, reliably remembered for whatever reason. Some of them were one-offs. Some of them I had like consistently over a long period of time that had a very distinct like structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's maybe like one or two that were so extremely vivid that I woke up like deeply emotional as if I had lived a whole nother life.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And like messed me up for at least half a day. And I had to like write out like a journal entry just to like process the emotional weight of it. And then some of them, it's like I lasted 1,000 years in a second and none of it made sense. And I wake up and I'm like, thank goodness that's over. That was a mess.
So I was really excited when I got to this dream part in the book because I was like, perfect. We can talk about dreams on the podcast.
Let's go, Victoria.
I love talking about dreams. Specifically, I have dream continuity.
Whoa.
All right. Okay.
So not only do I have recurring locations in my dreams, but sometimes certain dreams will have installments. So I'll have a dream that will come back a month later or sometimes a year later, but I'll still remember the previous dream. In my dream, I will remember that I've had the dream before.
Huh.
Yeah.
This is the VUU,
Yeah.
the Victoria unconscious universe.
Yeah. I don't think I lucid dream. I did once have a dream where I realized in the dream that I was dreaming. So then I tried to lucid dream in the dream, but I wasn't actually lucid dreaming. The first thing I did was I went to an ice cream shop that was closed. I made it open.
Maybe that's what you want subconsciously. Deep down,
Yeah.
you want ice cream.
No, the first thing I would do is fly or something. Sometimes I'll have dreams where the same circumstances will repeat and I will remember that I've encountered these circumstances before. So I'll try to either do it again the same way or do it again but better. But then the dream won't let me basically conquer the dream.
This sounds like purgatory.
No, okay.
No, Victoria, what you describe, I've had.
Okay.
I know exactly what you mean, where you realize you're dreaming and you're like, this is my chance. Sorry, you have to meow that. But that is the feeling of like, oh, quickly now.
Yeah.
And then it literally is that feeling where I've tried to fly when I've like realized I've been dreaming, like do the lucid dream thing, and I can't. And I have to concentrate, and it's like learning a superpower.
I've never lucid dreamed though. I realize it, but it's still within the confines of the dream. So for example, one of my recurring dreams that I had when I was a kid was that I was Violet from The Incredibles.
No, that tracks. I feel like that's a thing. You dream you're a character.
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of dreams where I can't find my way to something. So then when I have the dream again, I'll be like, now I know the way, but then the way changes. So it doesn't even matter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that. I also have a dream mall, which is a big shopping mall where I have various dreams in certain areas. So there's a giant food court.
So you have like a mind palace, kind of.
An unconscious mind palace that you return to and you cannot control.
Yeah. I have a dream food court where everything is giant.
Wow.
The escalators will launch you off when you try to go down them. So you'll start at the top of the escalator, but before you can get to the bottom and step off, it'll just launch you.
Interesting.
There's also a section that's just all elevators, where some elevators go to certain floors, but other elevators don't go to those floors, so you have to pick the correct elevator. Sometimes I get trapped in the elevator, just stuff like that. So it's like I will have dreams that take place in the mall, but like in different sections of the mall.
Again,
this is fascinating.
this sounds like purgatory.
It is interesting how there's like a conscious amount of effort that you have to put into navigating your dream mall.
Yeah. I have a dream amusement park now. That's a new one.
Is it near the mall geographically?
No. I don't know where they are geographically to each other.
There's something really scary about the words dream amusement park. Like, I know amusement parks are places for fun and whimsy, but I feel like there's like a deep cultural memory in us about amusement park equals scary and bad, and I don't know why.
Well, I gotta say, all of my dreams that take place at this amusement park are all about finding bathrooms.
Wow. So that's just like a very real, like, your
It's
brain is
always
like, listen, we got to train ourselves because we know this is going to happen again.
I take back everything I've said. This is something different.
Gino's like, there's like something in the human genome that fears the amusement park. And Victoria's like, I can't find the bathroom. Well, as long as we're talking about dreams, have either of you ever had the dream where you're the leader of a singular nation state, a sovereign nation state? Have you ever had this dream? You know, you're the leader of a sovereign nation state, and you dream that a bunch of boys and girls have been kidnapped and eaten by giants in the middle of the night, and that there's a big friendly giant who places a little girl on your windowsill who's going to tell you where to find those evil giants as well as where to find the big friendly giant? Have you
I
ever
dream
had
that
one?
every night.
Gosh, well, then Sophie's plan would not have worked on you.
Yeah. Thank you for getting us back on track, Michael. I realize we have drifted far away from describing plot whatsoever, and we're just talking about fun anecdotes.
Well, that's half the point of this podcast anyway. But that's Sophie's plan. Because the inevitable plot point that we arrive at is Sophie going, okay, so all these giants are eating people all over the place.
We got to stop them.
Yeah.
Let's go to the seat of government.
Yeah, so Sophie's plan is we're going to get the queen to help us. And if we can convince the queen that giants are real and that this is happening, then the queen will send her armed forces to defeat the giants or capture them.
Do something.
The queen was very specific. I don't condone killing, which, all right, British monarch. But so she captures the giants and puts them in a big hole in the ground, which is much better.
Yeah.
In prison forever. Seats, snozzcumbers.
I realized, because you said that the BFG kidnapped Sophie because he's afraid that when humans learn about giants, they will put them in a zoo. That's basically what they did.
Yeah, well, he's more worried about him being put in a zoo.
The BFG gets a very nice custom mansion built for him by the queen with a little cottage next to it for Sophie, which is very cute.
Yes. The BFG sells out the rest of his own kind for perks.
And then he sells out how he sells out the rest of his own kind by writing the BFG and selling it.
Yes. It's an interesting line this book toes where Sophie's like, it's horrible that these giants go off and eat people. And the BFG is kind of like, interestingly enough, even though he has no love for the other giants, he calls her on it where he's like, livestock that humans eat, I'm sure they would have the same argument, which is I didn't do anything to these people. I'm not asking for this, and yet they're still choosing to eat me. You know, humans create the environments that are most suitable to them, and we giants, much the same, are doing likewise. And the lore for giants in the book isn't even like they're a whole nother kind of human. It's like they're described as literally coming into being just spontaneously.
And they can come out of being, too. They just vanish into the ether.
Yeah. It's like they're forces of nature.
There also is a discussion that the BFG has with Sophie where he says other humans are also cruel to other humans.
Yeah, he does the whole humans are the only animal that kills its own kind, which is a bit of a reduction.
That's not really true.
Yeah.
chimpanzees have wars.
Yeah.
And dolphins, don't get me started on dolphins.
And there's also a moment where they say, like, cats don't kill each other, and we've read Warrior Cats.
Yeah.
So
We know cats kill each other.
British cats, specifically.
it was interesting running into that explanation, though, in the BFG. Like, the idea of humans as livestock for larger thing is just scaling up the food chain in a way that is not nice for humans. Because I've definitely run into that analogy in, like, media that takes itself much more, like, serious.
Like heavy sci-fi.
Like
sci-fi. Grimdark sci-fi.
Grimdark sci-fi and anime and stuff where it's like, how can you say that it's an evil thing for humans to be treated as livestock? Or like vampire media. A lot of vampire media does this thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, but you eat pigs and you eat cows and sheep and other animals. We're just doing the same thing. And it's treated as like, oh, fascinating. But we can't let this stand, can we? And meanwhile, the BFG is just like, well, when you get to thinking about it, it's not too different from just cows and sheep and chickens and such. And Sophie's like, oh, I guess so. And that's it.
It's bringing up some sort of deep philosophy, but also it felt to me like an advocation for vegetarianism.
Yeah,
which
sure.
is not followed through because then they immediately eat bacon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
But then the BFG says that even plants have
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
thoughts and feelings.
Trees and grass scream when you cut them or
Yeah.
chop them.
Yeah.
So don't eat anything.
So don't eat anything, honestly.
Yeah.
Just fizzle whip or whatever it is.
The only moral thing to do is starve and die.
Oh, no.
An interesting amount of like just existential dreariness in Roald Dahl books, huh?
Yeah, but at the end of the book, like you said, Michael, it's not really about considering the human condition or taking a moral stance. It's really about making your own life comfortable.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
And that's what they do. They're like the giants eating people. That's bad. What if we can stop them and get some cool queen benefits in the same time? Now I've got a house. And they're in a pit.
And then there's a little anecdote about how 3 drunk people jump over the fence and into the pit
And they get eaten.
and they get eaten.
Yeah.
Also,
I did think it
there's
was
some
funny.
real ghastly stuff in this book.
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I thought that part was funny because in order to solve the problem, all they did was put up a sign, which, like, are drunk people going to listen to a sign?
There's a few moments in this book where it kind of indicts the people or systems in power a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, even though it is like this whole Sophie's like, the queen is a good person and she'll make sure. And the queen is like, I don't condone violence. We'll just capture the giants. There's still like the head of the Air Force and the Army that when they go to Giant Land to capture the giants, the head of the Air Force and the Army point at the giants and look at their soldiers and say, all right, men, bravely do your duty and tie up those giants. And they back way the heck away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking about being a little guy and trying to tie up a giant like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Be a lot easier to just hit him from afar.
You wanted to talk about all the ghastly stuff in this book.
Oh, one of the ideas is that Sophie asks the BFG, how come no one, like, how could all these giants be going around the world eating people and people are just disappearing and there's not some major public outcry? And the BFG, that's when he goes into his whole, people kill each other all the time, life is crazy, the world is very big and complex. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of every single person that maybe disappears somewhere. It's hard to draw connecting lines between those things.
He says that. He says that in a way that's like, oh, like people disappear all the time, no one's going to notice. But they do notice.
They do.
Yeah. They don't just pick up random people here and there. They full on go and eat entire families in one night.
They clear out orphanages.
Yeah.
Like, you would notice that.
And more than that, they leave the bones on the street.
Yeah.
Like an entire schoolhouse dormitory of little boy bones that this one giant, like, for that to happen, he just picks up the little kids and like a shish kebab just like strips the meat off the bones and lets the bones fall.
It's a terrifying world they live in.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
Horrifying. Anyway, it makes Sophie's case easier when she convinces the BFG to mix up a bunch of other dreams to create this dream that the BFG then basically like feeds to the queen's subconscious, blows it through her window in the night with his special trumpet. The end of the queen's dream is that there will be a little girl on her windowsill who will tell her how to solve the problem. And Sophie very cleverly has the BFG place her on the queen's windowsill so that when the queen wakes up, it's like, oh,
it was real.
it was real.
Then what else is real?
Mm.
And then the queen asked the BFG afterwards, can you tell me where else the giants went this week? And then the BFG says, oh, they went to, I don't remember, name of
Sweden.
country. Sweden.
They went to Sweden, and so she calls Sweden, and the king of Sweden's like, oh, it's horrible. Like, this family disappeared. The queen's like, great. I'll call Baghdad. And there's this moment where the king of Baghdad's like, hi, we're just chopping people's heads off. And
yeah,
I'm like,
that was
Wait, I completely missed that.
yeah. Well,
How did I
the
miss that?
queen basically asks, what is it? What does she say?
let's find the exact moment. Because
I'm
she's
pretty
like,
sure I
who's
highlighted
in
it.
charge of Baghdad? And her assistant's like, here's the Sultan of Baghdad on the phone.
Okay. In 5 seconds, a voice was on the line. Here is the Sultan of Baghdad speaking, the voice said. Listen, Sultan, the queen said. Did anything unpleasant happen in your city 3 nights ago? Every night, unpleasant things are happening in Baghdad, the Sultan said. We are chopping off people's heads like you are chopping parsley. I've never chopped parsley in my life, the queen said. I want to know if anyone has disappeared recently in Baghdad. Oh, only my uncles, blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
At that point,
casually.
just casually. Roald Dahl. Come on, we're
Can't defend
enjoying
that.
this whimsy story about giants and dreams. Cut it out.
Again, looping us back to the casual sort of,
Yeah.
the world's mystifying and strange, and Panama tastes like hats. Yeah,
See,
this sounds right.
This is why I enjoyed the parts of the book that were about Sophie and the BFG
Yeah.
and the dreams. And then once they started talking to the queen, I was like, I am enjoying this book less.
Because then, yeah, again, as we said, it becomes wholeheartedly British propaganda.
Yeah.
And it could have been, because there's a moment after that where the Air Force is trying to follow the BFG, which, I mean, just this idea of this, like, of going, how do I solve this plot problem in my book where the giants are eating the humans? They just go to the government, and the government sends the military after him. It's like the most A to B solution. But there's a moment where it like combines those two ideas of like the whimsy of the giant world meeting like the very cold reality of like I don't know, the human world in the form of like the military and the government, where it like works for this crystal clear moment where when the helicopters are following the BFG, the head of the Air Force is like looking out the window of the lead helicopter and trying to keep track of like where he is on the atlas.
I did think that part was fun because they were like, we've gone off the atlas, which implies that they think the Earth is flat also.
Or the Earth is smaller than it is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe... I was gonna say maybe he turns the page and he's like, okay, based on the atlas, we should be over here. And then he looks out and he's like, no, we're not. It's just still something
No, they
else.
straight up say we've gone off the atlas. And then another person in the helicopter says, oh, we're in the blank pages. That's why there's 2 blank pages at the back of every atlas so that you can add new discoveries, which I thought was a
think
fun
it's very
concept.
cute.
Yeah.
And it's very fun that the pilot is described, like, given this, like, very, like, featured extra treatment, where it's like he has a big mustache and he's very proud of it. And he thinks of himself as very adventurous.
And he has his own drawing, too, which
Yeah.
is like, all
Yeah.
right, pilot, go off.
It's just a very whimsical, like, it seems like a grand adventure. And then, like, the head of the army is, like, sitting further back in the helicopter, the most terrified of all, and is like, what do you mean we're off the atlas? I thought that moment worked quite well.
I like that moment too.
And then they put
Just
the giants in a
stuff
pit.
after that.
Put the giants in the hole when you don't want them around.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where it's like all of the moments of whimsy, Roald Dahl captures it so well. It's when he starts weaving in the reality where I was like, I don't know about that.
Because it's like, it's not really reality. It's quotation mark reality, end quotation mark.
It's humor derived from real world references, but those references are seen through a very specific lens.
Yes.
I did want to talk about Sophie a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think it's kind of fun that we read Matilda first, and then now we're reading the BFG, both of which feature very small, tiny little girls, and both of which
Feature an adult that needs help.
Yes, also that.
Again, it's
But-
using size to dramatize the plight of being a child.
Yeah.
The world is so big and unwieldy, and I'm just a very small little guy.
Well, I really like the concept that she's an orphan and she gets whisked away. And then at the end, she ends up with a loving fatherly figure who is the BFG. And similarly in Matilda, she's in a very unfortunate circumstance. And then by the end, she's whisked away to go live with Miss Honey. So there's this ongoing theme, at least with these 2 books, of adopted family and childhood escapism.
Also really nailing in the British orphan trope,
Yeah.
which keeps popping up in literature. And what's going on there? You guys okay? We have so many orphans.
There's the British orphan pipeline, it seems, is either hey, I just won the orphan lottery here, or it's the giant eats you.
Yeah. And there's sort of a scale of British orphan from like you got the Oliver twist all the way down at the end. It was like you start miserable and then it's just like a hard, long slog to get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And then at the other end you have the BFG where it's like you start miserable and giant and the queen and we're good.
Just wipe the dust off those hands.
In the span of basically 24 hours, Sophie goes from being an orphan to eating at the queen's palace and getting, like, she gets to wear, like, a hand-me-down from the princess, and she gets all this amazing food.
And she gets to
gets
join a military operation.
Yeah.
Everybody's dream.
Yeah.
Every kid's greatest aspiration.
Also, at the end, the BFG writes a book.
Yeah.
And it's implied that it's this book that we read.
This book.
Why was that so dark and ominous?
No.
And it was me, the BFG, the whole time.
How do you guys feel about literature or just media in general that creates a sort of meta-narrative where it's like, whoa, the story you're consuming was created by the story you're consuming? Or the person that's narrating is actually like this character or this person in the story, like the narrators in the world. How do you feel about that sort of media?
I think it's fun.
Yeah, I think it's good. It can work. In the context of the BFG, I think it mostly works because the BFG is described as... Well, the BFG routinely describes himself as not being very learned.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell there's like an amount of insecurity about that. And so the idea that he eventually like develops his command of the English language, I guess, or whatever language he speaks, because it's not necessarily determined or delineated like if the giants know all languages or speak all languages or...
I mean, it's implied it's English because the puns are English.
Yeah.
At any rate, it's a nice little button that the BFG, who is very insecure about his words and getting them mixed up, for his own satisfaction, eventually reaches a point where he writes a book where the words aren't mixed up.
It's his little character arc.
Yeah, his little character arc. Personally, I think it's a little more sweet when, even though he mixes up his words, Sophie just understands him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that when the government officials are getting like upset, I can't understand what he's saying. Sophie's like, well, he means this. And it's like, you just talk to someone enough. You spend a little time with them, you'll understand him.
Yeah.
But I think there are plenty of stories that do the whole meta-narrative thing that works. Or we just read a series of unfortunate events, which seems to do something like that without a whole lot of explanation early on. And just even the inclination of it lends an air of mystery or mystique.
Yeah.
I don't know, Victoria, if you have like more, because I can't even think of specific examples necessarily beyond the most recent ones we've read.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other...
How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
The first book was much like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really cool.
Yeah. I think it's fun because it provides a different lens on the story if you read it from the perspective of, oh, this character is writing their own almost biography.
Yeah.
It makes a sense of, oh, this was real, or this happened.
Yeah.
Or this could happen in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And the magic of the BFG is just out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And there's a big pit next to the Queen's Palace full of giants. Don't go in.
Don't go in there. Just look. Watch them eat snozzcumbers and complain.
That's why you never visit the palace. Don't go there.
There's a secret giant pit in the backyard.
Do you have any books or media like that, Gino, that you were sort of thinking of beyond the BFG that makes a reference to itself as like a meta-narrative within a larger narrative?
The only one that immediately comes to mind, and this is kind of a wild grab, but the Adventure Zone podcast. Their first arc, every episode is introduced by a narrator who always introduces the episode with a joke. Like, oh, and this week, the characters are going to do silly thing. It's the Adventure Zone. And then, like, intro music plays. But then, towards the very end, it's revealed that, like, oh, this narrator was actually a character in the Adventure Zone that's retelling the story.
Ah.
And then it becomes very, like, mystical. And part of you is like, whoa, that's really cool. Like, this person has been introducing the story the whole time and is actually this character. And on the other hand, you're like, no, that character was definitely making meta jokes. So... That's what just pops into my mind. I can't think of any media that does it poorly enough for me to dislike it, but I'm sure that exists. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting path you can take because there's definitely a world where you don't need it. And I think it can definitely overcomplicate a story if you're trying to weave in a meta-narrative.
Yeah.
Like, you're listening to a podcast, listeners, and there's an impulse among podcasters making audio dramas to weave in a meta-narrative. Like, oh, this is a radio broadcast you're listening to from the post-apocalypse world, or this is a audio diary, or this is a reporter. Like, there's a need to justify why it's audio.
Almost tracing back to like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds.
Exactly. And while I think that's always a cool concept, I think sometimes it can also be limiting.
Yeah.
Because if you have to create a reason to justify why the story exists, then there's only so many stories you can tell.
You can box yourself in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's a thin line also between like a Percy Jackson style first person narration where it's like, this story really happened, watch out. But like Percy's not writing a book. Clearly not.
Yeah. It's a very like gray area between that.
I just think it's interesting to think about how stories are told.
Yeah.
I think when it's done well, it can be really effective. I would say in this book, when it's revealed at the end, like, oh, the BFG wrote this book, it didn't enhance the book for me necessarily. It was just kind of a fun fact.
Another point of whimsy.
End. Yeah, but if Roald Dahl had decided not to add that, that would have also been fine. Although I do think that the arc of the BFG starting off being, I guess, a little embarrassed of his lack of schooling and then going and becoming a published author is fun.
You put that a lot more succinctly than I did.
Well, you already did all the talking about it, so.
All the talking around it necessary to eventually find one's way to a point.
I just do the summarizing.
Don't say that. You do plenty of wonderful analysis and recounting of the vastest dream spaces I've ever heard. Like, holy smokes.
I do write down my dreams.
Okay, cool.
I've heard that helps. I've heard that when you want to learn how to lucid dream, you have to write down your dreams immediately.
It's not to learn how to lucid dream. It's just so I can remember them. I don't write them all the time. It's only if there's a particularly interesting one. Sometimes I'll tell them to my friends. I have to do it like when I first wake up, though. Like you said, Michael, like once I start getting up and going about my day, my memory of the dream becomes more vague.
Yeah.
So usually what I have to do is I wake up and then I immediately turn to my phone and I either write it down in my notes or I text a friend like, I just had this weird dream. And they're always like, whoa.
All lowercase, just whoa.
Yeah.
Have you ever had like the inverse of that? Because I know I just within the last 30 minutes or so described like, oh, when you don't move, it helps you retain the dream immediately after waking up. But have you ever like been going through your day and you just like recall in the middle of the day like, oh, I had this dream last night? Like it just kind of comes back to you?
No, I don't think I've ever had that.
It feels like it's happened at least once, but not significantly enough for me to remember it. Also, like, just because I write down the dream doesn't mean I can look back and recall the dream either. Because I'm literally looking through my notes right now and I'm like,
what is this?
What? Because also the downside of writing a dream when you first wake up from it is that none of it makes sense because it's a dream.
Yeah.
Often my dreams, let's say I'm like in a dream with like 3 friends. Those 3 friends will probably become different people by the end of the dream.
Yeah.
So when I'm writing the dream, I'll be like, okay, so so-and-so was there, and then suddenly they were another person, so then that person did this, and then they became another person. And it's fun,
the
though.
subconscious.
I love dreams. I think they're funny. Well, until they're not funny. You know?
I think I did the journal thing for a little bit as well. You know, when you learn like, I can lucid dream by journaling. Heck yeah, I'm going to do that. I think that actually did lead into like the first time that I lucid dreamed effectively.
Oh, whoa.
Ooh.
But it was again, like I lucid dreamed. I realized I was like there in the moment and I was like, okay, time to fly. And that was when I realized I had to like teach myself how to fly in the dream, which was like
Physics?
willpower based.
That's
which
so
was,
disappointing.
Well, I did eventually get the hang of it. Because there were a few dreams after that. I had stopped journaling after that because I was like, I mean, I got to like put in the practice to like just to get to lucid dream and then put in more practice to learn how to fly imaginarily. I'm done. But a few times after that, just without necessarily prompting, I would lucid dream and I was able to like remember my previous attempts of like flying within lucid dreams. And I was able to get to the point where I could fly. And
You gotta get the training montage.
I will say, the Peter Pan logic
Yeah.
of you got to believe you can do it.
Yeah.
holds up. You have to, at least for me, I had to believe that I couldn't just like go, okay, it's up. I had to be like, this is the way the world works. Like if I believe I can do it, then I can fly. And I did. And I was flying around my neighborhood. And then like I reached like a render distance, like a draw distance where like my brain could no longer conceive of like everything past a given street. And it was just like this gray wall, like this gray mist basically.
It's like in WandaVision.
Oh, yeah, huh?
Yeah.
That's my fun experience with lucid flying.
That's very cool.
That's terrifying. Are you kidding me? That scares me.
The draw distance, the
Just
render?
like all of it.
Oh.
Gino's like, I don't want to.
I don't think I'd ever want to lucid dream. I think there's a lack of control. Like, obviously, reliving the real world is random and chaotic and dangerous and scary. But at least here, I can pretend that I know what's going on. And at this moment, I'm like, okay, podcast time. But in a dream, I don't know. There's like a loss of, even though it's my brain, there's like a loss of like control. And that terrifies me. Like,
so lucid dreaming would be scarier for you than regular dreaming?
I think so, because then I'd realize I'm in a dream and then I would freak myself out, I guess. If I'm just regular dream, I'm just like, oh, yes, the car wash is purple. Like, I don't know.
Okay, I guess I can see it.
And yes, like running into a render distance wall is, there's something almost Cthulhuoid about that to me.
I suppose. Well, it's like
Edge of the world sort of deal.
Well, it's like I knew I was dreaming.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was pretty banal. My logic was like I would expect like whatever I was seeing to spill into something nonsensical. But instead,
You're just like, oh, it's the end.
it was just like wall. Like this is the box on this map. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll fly down to the gas station there and just have a little look around. I'm awake. Oh, well, that was fun.
I do have a random tangent dream-related question. Do you guys text people in your dreams? Do you have text conversations in your dreams?
If I have, I don't remember.
Okay, that's valid.
Same.
I've had entire dreams that are just in like Discord messages.
Huh. You know what that means, Victoria? Spending too much time on that computer.
I know.
That personal laptop.
Time to touch grass.
I know.
Like I've had dreams where I've played a lot of Pokemon and then I've just dreamed that I'm playing more Pokemon.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm literally dreaming about just more Pokemon. Like nothing crazy's happening. And I wake up and be like, I made it to the fourth. That was a dream. I did not make it to the fourth gym. Okay, I got to do it again.
Are they good? Are they good text conversations, Victoria? Are they?
They're
fine?
usually related to whatever's happening in the dream. So I'll be dreaming about something, and then
then you pull out your dream phone and open your dream Discord app.
Yeah.
And
Guys, this food court food is so big.
Sometimes in the dream, it's like I'll be texting someone, but it's like regular phone texting. But sometimes the screen will transition where now I'm just staring at like a full screen view of the Discord app.
Like it's your entire sphere
And
vision.
I'm just watching the messages. I don't know. It's really weird. I don't know how to explain it.
The singularity is upon us. Technology becomes us now.
I know like some people, like they can't read in their dreams at all.
Oh.
I've heard stuff related to that.
Like people, they'll look at, let's say, a book and they'll know what it says, but if they really think about it, they didn't actually read any of the words.
Same with clock faces or
Yeah,
something?
something like that. Human brains are so interesting. And like scientists still can't really figure out why we dream. I did have a dream the other day that the zombie apocalypse started while I was at school, but I was stuck in the bathroom.
That's my
I have a lot
favorite
of dreams
episode of
about
We're
bathrooms.
Alive.
That's the opposite of your mall dream or of your theme park dream.
Wow.
Now you've found the bathroom, but you've really found it and you can't get out.
Yeah.
Gosh, is every Victoria dream just like a Pyrrhic situation? Like, I got this, but at what cost?
I'm on
have a lot of
Discord, but at what
dreams.
cost?
I have a lot of dreams where I like run away from things. I'm very stressed in my dreams.
I think because you're stressed in your life.
Yeah, probably that. At least, okay, so I know the common dream experience of running away is, oh, I can't go fast enough. Oh, no.
Oh, no, mine is like I'm running constantly.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is it like you're very fast and you're like, oh, I can actually get away? Or is it like you're just running and whatever it is keeping up with you?
I think I run pretty fast in my dreams, but the people chasing me are also running fast, so it doesn't really make much of a difference.
Physics are fun. How about you, Gino?
The one dream I can recall where I ran was when I was running down a spiral tower. But the fear in that dream wasn't that I would get caught. It was that no one I met would believe me or would do anything about the
Ooh.
thing that was chasing me.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't afraid for myself necessarily. I was afraid for them because they weren't
Whoa.
getting up and joining me. I was like, I can outrun this thing and you can outrun this thing, but you need to start running. And they're like, eh.
Yeah.
And it was just like 8 hours of that. And I woke up and I was like, no one listens to me.
Well, what a fascinating discussion we've had today.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any last thoughts on the BFG?
British propaganda.
British propaganda.
Sophie's really like, oh, the Queen is the nicest, bravest, most powerful person in the whole world, the greatest nation on earth. We've never done anything wrong in our entire history.
And the BFG's like, okay.
Can I stop eating snozzcumbers?
Yeah.
I'll do anything to stop
I love how
eating
that is what
snozzcumbers.
convinces him, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
What,
at first
like-
he's like, I don't know. This is still putting me at risk because we're letting
Food is a
humans know.
powerful motivator.
Yeah.
That's
Ask any college student.
Ask any
yeah.
human being.
That's, you know what? That's better than mine and more accurate.
I'll do a lot of things for food, yeah.
Literally, Sophie's like, you can have some bacon and eggs. And BFG's like, done. Let's go.
He's
Let's
like,
get
I don't
outta
even know
here."
what that is, but it sounds better than snozzcumbers.
You bacon eggs? All right. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well then, until next time.
Sell out your kin for a continental breakfast.
Until next time, growing up, I had a road doll cookbook. And the snozzcumber
Oh yeah.
was you take a cucumber and you hollow it out, you stuff full of cream cheese, and you put nuts on the outside, or raisins or something. And then you ate it with your mouth. Doesn't that sound great?
Oh.
Doesn't that sound delicious? Snozzcumbers. They're real and they're coming for you. Thank you for listening to Nostalgia Club. If you enjoyed the episode, follow us on Twitter @_Nostalgia Club and on Instagram @Nostalgia Club Podcast. Leave a comment, give us a rating, and subscribe. You can also send us an email with your suggestions for what we should review next at nostalgiaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
Let's go.
We were talking earlier about how it's basically just British propaganda. And that's what BFG stands for. British Fropaganda.
It's so good.
British Fropaganda.
Well, that's how the BFG would say propaganda.
That's true.
That's the ending clip. Future Juno, put that clip at the end.
You got it.
We'll do the whole episode in reverse.
Whoa.
Until next time.
All right, now let's just talk about stuff, and then we'll do plot summary, and then we'll do vibes.
That would be insane.